Well, welcome to Black Men Speak, a podcast that highlights ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. I am your host, Keith Dent. September is known for many things, from marking the end of summer to the beginning of the academic year in many countries, and here in the U.S., especially this is week one of football season, the NFL. So it's also globally recognized from various international observances, such as International Literacy Day and World Peace Day, fall in this month. And for men, it's also Prostate Health Month. You know, prostate cancer is the second most common cancer among American men, after skin cancer. According to the American Cancer Society, Black men in the U.S. have among the highest documented prostate cancer incident rates in the world. Over twice as likely to die from prostate cancer and more than likely to be diagnosed at an advanced stage compared to non-Hispanic white men. Given the significant disparities in prostate cancer, incidence and survival, special focus should be placed on ensuring diversity in prostate cancer clinical trials, representation from diverse ethnic and racial groups in clinical trials can shed light on variations in disease progression and treatment response between groups. Black men, however, are unrepresented in prostate cancer clinical trials, despite their proportion of the US population with the disease. Beyond clinical trials for approval, products treating or diagnosing prostate cancer should continue to be studied once the market to identify any potential deficiencies in efficacy for Black men. But for Black men, it's not just about prostate cancer, but a spectrum of chronicle of medical conditions which can impact their quality of life. And at the crux of this problem is the lack of access to medical care and studies designed specifically for men of color in order to provide treatment. Now, our guest today, Dr. Okey Enyia, is a health policy expert, government relations leader, and scholar activist whose work sits at the intersection of public health, advocacy, and equity. He is the author of his second forthcoming book, The John Henry Health Equity Playbook, a 4-year policy agenda for Black men, which lays out a bold roadmap to improve health outcomes, strengthen families, and transform systems of care. With more than 15 years of experience in Washington, D.C., Dr. Enyia has worked on Capitol Hill with national nonprofits and alongside grassroots organizations to shape legislation and advance policies that impact millions of Americans. He is the founder and CEO of Enyia Strategies, a policy advocacy consulting firm that helps people shape policy at the local and federal levels. So, Dr. Enyia, welcome. How are you doing? Oops. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So I heard your book, John Henry. So, and I guess that's one of our, I'm gonna say fables, but yeah, the John Henry. So why did you decide that to be the next title of your book?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much. Before I answer that question, I do want to thank you for lifting up the prostate cancer disparities at the beginning of your show. That is all. That particular issue is personal to me because my dad and 3 of my uncles are prostate cancer survivors. And that lived experience also is helping to shape the content that went into this book of mine, the John Henry Health Equity Playbook. And so, who was John Henry, right? So that is the question. Who was John Henry, and why did I choose that particular legend as a metaphor for exploring ways to reimagine Black men's health in the context of policy? I'll also note that there actually is a real John Henry Martin,
Okay.
who was a sharecropper in North Carolina, and my colleague Dr. Sherman James, he actually came up with what is coined the John Henryism hypothesis. And so to kind of put a fine point on the intro, who was John Henry? So in folklore, he was a strong black man who was challenged to race a train through a mountain, and he had a hammer in his hand. And so legend has it that um, as they were going through the mountain, the the the, the train was drilling, and he was using his hammer. He actually won that race of hammering through a mountain to beat the train. The paradox is that, or the irony is that, because of the stress and strain and the exhaustion that ensued from beating that machine, that train, he died. And so uh, that is a metaphor for the stress and strain of structural racism. That is a metaphor for we as Black men having to navigate oppressive and suppressive systems at the detriment of our health and well-being. We know that Black men have the shortest life expectancy than almost any other racial and ethnic group in the United States. We know that Black men get high blood pressure sooner than other groups. Black men suffer from a plethora of other health disparities issues um, compared to other racial and ethnic groups. And so that's one part of it. Going back to John Henry Martin, um, in the 1970s, 80s, when Dr. Sherman James was in graduate school, he actually was interested in exploring high blood pressure and diabetes and other health issues. And as fate would have it, he met with a family in North Carolina, and uh, uh, and so John Henry Martin's wife, um, she actually let Dr. James know that her husband's name was John Henry Martin, and because of Dr. James's interest in exploring these unique health conditions, um, it was very serendipitous that his name was also the same as the legend's name. Now, what happened with John Henry Martin was that he was, as you know, as I mentioned, a sharecropper, but he was also interested in getting his family out of debt, and so he was on his farm. He worked so hard for several years that he ended up having high blood pressure, severe peptic ulcers, and arthritis. And so while he was able to get his family out of debt, it cost him his health. And so
Mm-hmm.
because of that dichotomy, Dr. James um, came up with the John Henryism hypothesis to describe the lived experiences of those who live a lifestyle of stress and strain. And so, given my own experience and my research, and given that I'm a Black man, part of my calling, as I've come to discover, uh, has been to bring language and to contemporize both the legend and the real person in this current context. So that's the longer answer to your question, but hopefully it provides enough context for your audience.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned, I know in doing a little research on, some of the your studies, you had mentioned that about the chronic health issues that are affecting Black men's quality of life. So what are some of those chronic illnesses where we are basically, I would assume, the leaders in when it comes to negative health? We mentioned prostate cancer at the top, but what are some of those others?
Yeah, so heart diseases, diabetes, cancers we mentioned. We are, in terms of homicide, Black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. And I mean, if you just kind of run the gamut of any issues, COVID-19, Black men were more likely to die and or had worse health outcomes compared to other groups of men. And so, just kind of broadly speaking, there are several comorbidities that historically have in- impacted the health and well-being of Black men. And one most clear statistic is life expectancy. Um, it's it's been decades where, again, this is due to slavery and Jim Crow and other movements that have shaped um, policy and practice, which have shaped health outcomes. And so, it really comes down to um, how do we shift the paradigm? How do we help to equip and empower Black men and families and friends and colleagues to see the value in what we bring as Black men? How do we help to shape policy that helps to provide targeted interventions for Black men? We know what works. But the question is, do those in power have the political will to actually support and advocate for and allocate funding for unique programs um, and interventions that have been proven to work? So yeah, it covers all the ground:
Mm-hmm.
heart disease, diabetes, obesity, cancers, homicides, etc. And so part of what I'm trying to do is to uplift those unique issues, but at the same time, help to reframe the narrative um, to help people see the brilliance and the strengths and the assets that Black men have brought to the world for hundreds of years.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get in on that. I'm gonna challenge, not necessarily you, but just where we are today. But we'll save that. I want to get into the fact that in your playbook, you outline 3 pillars. So health, equity, infrastructure, economic stability, and community empowerment. So of those 3, which one do you see is really the starting point that we have to do as a community?
Yeah. So, whenever I have these conversations, there are so many issues, and Part of the reason why I chose 3 right now is because it is rooted in what is called the social drivers of health framework, which actually covers several issue areas that impact health outcomes. And so, for example, income, education, housing, economics, transportation, etc. Right? So, but the brain also works best in threes. And I would propose that we focus on the the um, the economic pillar, because if one doesn't have meaningful employment, which is shaped by racist policies and practices, they then you're less likely to be able to have employer-sponsored healthcare and insurance.
Healthcare.
Yes.
Right.
And so that's one part of it. Secondly, I'm real big on entrepreneurship, and so how do we encourage our families, our communities, our brothers, our sisters to explore opening up their own businesses and becoming not just employees but employers? How can we encourage our communities to actually hire our own? How do we become self-sustaining? Um, but that's also challenged by policies that have been put in place that are discriminatory, and that make it more difficult for um, for Black businesses to be invested in terms of venture capital. And so the disparities run the gamut. And unless and until we are at the place where and I talk about this in the book, how do we advocate for ourselves? How do we connect with key decision makers, local, state, and federal levels to advocate for investing in businesses, and how do we break through barriers that historically have made it more challenging for us to build wealth? We know that there was a huge historic racial wealth gap, and it's again rooted in racist policies. But at a very fundamental level, uh, if you're not able to have the resources that can help to support or pay for housing or pay for transportation or pay for medicine and pay for food, that is really where I would target. And then, you know, other things will build upon that particular base. But if you're not getting your basic needs met, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just the basic like food, safety, shelter, resources, like that's important. And so I'm real big on, if I were to pick one, it will be economics.
Okay. So I guess I want to challenge that question a little bit, because I guess and it may be more because of research. You may be able to help me on this. So we've always been behind the 8 ball, I guess, from a financial standpoint. But was there a time where it didn't necessarily impact our health? Meaning there were home remedies, or we ate better because we made our own, or we grew our own food that was helpful in where we are from a health standpoint. And then as an additional question to that, because of that, policies and things and making those changes take time. are there any innovative things that are being done or done to circumvent waiting for those changes to occur?
Yeah. So I am an ardent student of history, and so I look at all of this within the context of what has transpired over um, years, over decades. I say a lot that our health is our wealth. If you're not healthy, that impacts your ability to go to a doctor, uh, to be able to pay for services. If you if you're not healthy, um, you can fall into depression and anxiety. So it's a very integrated thing, and so the the challenge is that um, you, you can't just pick one. It has to be a more comprehensive effort, which is why my work is rooted in the social drivers of health framework. Because if we're able to tackle each of those elements of the framework, then that will facilitate the ability for better health outcomes. And um, I think, to answer your second question, we are in, we are in the age of AI. Um, there is a lot of education that is important to lean into in learning about this entire new way of living and knowledge production. I encourage folks within my circle, and I write about this in my book, is to, you know, it, as you use the various Gen AI tools, to be mindful of ethics and to be mindful of biases and other other inputs that can shape the outputs that you will put into the models in terms of Gen AI. Um, Now is the time to actually lean into this new technology, because it will
Hmm.
facilitate one's ability to really explore how do how can you monetize your value. Um, how, how can you find a language to be able to reach out to a state lawmaker's office, to
Hmm.
ask them about a bill? How can you learn more about what's happening at the local level with the local council member, or with a mayor? And so it's really about sharing these ideas and the ways in which they can help to to facilitate the ability for one to make more money, and to also help to shape policy. Because in my book, I talk about the ways in which you can use your story, your lived experience, to help to encourage those who have the power of the purse, or who have the ability to
Hmm.
allocate resources, to change their minds about who they want to allocate those resources to. So, um, it's I say I say all the time that it's not a you really cannot focus on one thing.
Hmm.
It typically is a multifaceted approach, and the reason why I key in on economics is because where things are right now, if you're able to think about the ways in which you can monetize your value, but also using Gen AI to update your resume or your CV. And so it's, how do you use the technology to be able to get past the barriers that have been in place for decades? And so that's where I land currently.
Hmm.
Um, And the playbook, it offers tactics and templates and scripts that can help bring language to the ways in which you in your own unique
Right.
space can engage.
So you mentioned AI, which was great, by the way, just to mention. How would and since and I don't want to talk about um, generations being lost, but I think if we want to really make the not make some of the mistakes that we made as adults, or we would probably want to start with the younger generation right now, because they will be adults soon, and if they don't really have the knowledge, and I do guess that they probably will have more because of the fact that they'll be more comfortable to search on their cell phone or things of that nature, but maybe they may be not as savvy on the civic engagement side.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that they could do to be more civically engaged, to know about the things that are going on in as far as the bills and things that are happening in government?
Yeah. So we are living in an era of misinformation and disinformation. Um, you know, I would typically encourage um, leaning into the social media platforms that are available that share all this information as far as who is running for office, who is doing what and when. But one of the challenges is that we have we we have to be able to your point, teach our children how to think critically and how to evaluate data and information, um, which gets into a much larger issue or challenge of how do we how do we meet people where they are with the most credible information possible. And I'm saying that because we live in a social media age right
Mm-hmm.
now where most people get their information, their content from what is posted. Um, and so, but when there are not enough of us, in, in terms of black and brown people that are at the table who know what's happening, who can hopefully share what's happening in policy and public health, etc., then those gaps will be there. And so this is the reason why I wrote my book, was because as a former House and Senate staffer on Capitol Hill, as a former lobbyist, uh, I've been on both sides of the table as a navigator and a staffer. And I have typically been one of a few conscious black men in the room when policy is being written and debated. And so there is a pipeline issue where, given my experience as a staffer on the Hill, given my travels across the country, being on podcasts, etc., how can I help to fill those gaps in terms of the ways in which we can engage civically? So I always advocate, yes, we don't just want to vote every 4 years for the president. We want to vote at every level, at every cycle, local, state, federal. Um, and that's a continuous work, because we know based upon history that the general public, they will typically only tune into politics um, you know every, uh, every 4 years, when in fact what I actually created in my book is what's called a cross cycle civic engagement framework, which actually it is being used by a few um, of my colleagues who are who are running Win with Black Men, who are running Black Men Vote, and so part of what that framework is doing is it's encouraging engagement at the very hyper local level, barbershops, sporting events, concerts, etc. So, and it's about engaging people in conversation and talking about policy and politics in civil ways. And when you're able to connect the dots between what what's happening on the ground with this mayor, with this council member, and how this policy of garbage collecting uh, can be changed because you have talked to that mayor or that person, in that seat, it becomes real. And so part of what I always advocate for is, kind of think about where you are and know that all politics is local, meaning that it's about the relationships, it's about the extent to which you're able to connect with those elected officials in ways that help to shape the policies that are drafted so that outcomes can be better for the people that are living in the communities that we serve.
Right. And that's quite interesting because I think for the most part, especially at the local level, there are more concerns about votes, which I can definitely understand, but it would be great for our local politicians to drill down and just to reach out to the young people, just so they know what they are and what the system is about, because they won't necessarily equate the two as far as, oh, this politician, oh, I know him or I know the name, but I don't know that this will him being in office or her being in office will impact me 4 years, 5 years down the line when I become an adult. And I don't know anything about their policies, what they stand for. And it really hurts me. So I think if politicians, especially the local ones, can go to schools, especially the high school level, and just introduce themselves, they won't be able to vote, but I think it would be helpful for them to understand and equate that, oh yeah, when people vote for these individuals, they impact me.
Yeah.
So I definitely would be, that's something that they hopefully can do. So another thing, how do you feel, fatherhood and family stability all tie into long-term health equity, especially for Black men?
Yeah, that's a huge question. So I think about this generationally or intergenerationally. So what I found in my work and in general is that for older Black men or for older men, that there is this genuine interest in serving as mentors to young men and boys, which is encouraging. I think um, that that is a good place to build. And for me, being a new father, I have a 22-month-old son. This entire work is even more personal now because I'm now driven by purpose. I'm now driven by legacy, and a, a, a key part of this kind of fatherhood piece is um, being clear on your purpose and your role and your ability to show up, be present and engaged. And we know that actually Black men are more likely to be present and engaged with their children compared to other races races, and ethnicities. Um, and so and so what you're battling against is the negative stereotype of the absent father, or the absent black father, the deadbeat dad, which is not the case for black men. Um, and so I think it's important to note that safety is important. Um, what I have found as I have traveled the country, and I've been, part of different communities, is the one common thread that I found is the extent to which black men are able to find spaces where they feel safe and not
Mm,
judged. And um, because those spaces are rare and or few and far between, it puts a strain on the ability for us as black men to show up as strong fathers. Um, and it requires disrupting and dismounting systems that aren't serving us well, and being intentional about creating safe, non-judgmental spaces for us to feel seen and heard. And I say a lot that healing oftentimes begins with being seen and heard, and or mental health and emotional health begins with being seen and heard. And all of those facets shape how we show up as men and as fathers. And you know, I I push back on the narrative. Um, I feel like, and folks can disagree, but when it comes to comparing the interests or the activities surrounding Mother's Day compared to Father's Day, there seems to be some differences in the ways in which fatherhood is discussed. And I'm hoping that that narrative has been shifting, but but I'm still real big on how do we create spaces for black men to show up, to learn how to become better fathers. And so for me, for example, I um, when I knew that I was going to become um, a, a father with my wife, I was very intentional about galvanizing what I'm framing as a fatherhood dream team. And that dream team was made up of men, of fathers, brothers who I respected and I trusted, who could help me better understand what I was getting into, what to expect, how to prepare, how to think about this role. And I was blessed to have the wherewithal to like create that community myself, but not everyone has that. And so um, that's that's the reason why I'm on these podcasts, is to discuss my own experience, so that hopefully that plants some seeds, for others to pursue the ways in which they can seek out that um, that type of support.
so is that, and that's great, by the way, but is that because you didn't have a father figure in your life prior, like as far as uncles or your father? Um, and then one thing that I did note is that that was an activity that you actually took action on. So I think my question would be, and I know it's a kind of a two-parter, but my question is it because we as men, black, or it doesn't have this, or black men don't know to kind of create these type of things, or is it because we just don't try to do it?
It's more the I would argue that it's more the former than the latter. I think that most of us, life has to happen to a point where we are open to changing or changing our approach to trying to figure out what will work. For me, yes, I had my dad, my, my parents are blessed to still be alive and healthy. Um, my dad is a model for me. But even with a two-parent household, there's still gaps, there's still issues, there's still things that we have to go through. And so, but at some point in my young adulthood, I just felt this strong need to, I needed more. And so when I left my home after college, I was like, I need to connect with some brothers, a community that saw me for me, which is actually one main reason why I, I, I joined my fraternity in college, and we're both I'm part of the same fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, and that was a vehicle that helped me to feel seen and heard. That 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 was a vehicle that provided the advisors, the mentors, the camaraderie to help me seek out support that could help me to continue to grow. So um, it's for me. It typically is a combination of factors. Um, I needed more. I wanted more. Life had to happen as well. There was a period of time where I fell into depression and anxiety and a trauma that I had to deal with. And so, now, I see a Black psychologist on a regular basis. I have an executive coach that I see regularly. But that is all part of um, wanting to change and also being intentional about serving as a voice, serving as a model, and talking about my own challenges and successes, which have led me to write this book to hopefully plant the seeds in others to also facilitate their own growth and development.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. So one of the things I think that we could talk about or think about is, and I think you mentioned it in the playbook, as far as creating more of a solidarity effort and not competition, especially with women's health and LGBTQ health, because of course, women have their own also challenges, which we're not necessarily talking about today, but they have their own challenges as far as maternal health and things of that nature, where those biases may come up. So what are could that be a thing where we build those coalitions as a kind of a way to advance, and what would be a strategy for that?
Yes, there's always strength in numbers, and I'm real big on building coalitions. This is not health is not a zero-sum game. This is about this isn't this for me. This isn't about either or. This is about both and. Um, and frankly, I think the one aspect of structural racism, it creates a scarcity mindset. It creates a culture that pits people against each other, that pits communities against each other, and that is part of the challenge, part of the issue. So I've been real big and intentional about saying that this advocating for men's health should not come at the expense of women's health. and I'm I want to make sure that in my narrative that I am coming from a place of solidarity of how can we build stronger people who build stronger, healthier families, who build stronger, healthier communities. And that is possible. Like that actually um, works if we're able to invest in those communities that historically have not had the support or the resources to thrive. And so, I know that I'm going to be, kind of fighting upstream with my narrative because it disrupts what's in place. But I've been like, I've been made for this moment. I've been built for this. Um, uh, Now is the time to disrupt, dismantle, and/or transform the narrative or the systems that have made it a challenge for people of all communities
Right.
to really thrive.
And well, I know think we can tend to be siloistic in our efforts.
Hmm.
So how will you break? I mean, since you're one that's trying to lead the charge, what will be some of the strategies that you will utilize in order to break some of those silos that are out there?
So it is arming people with the content in my book, because what it does is if more people know how to engage their elected officials at the local, state, and federal levels with a reframing of the narrative, it's not either or, it is both and, then that can help to then that can help to shift the narrative. And I think I'd also note that yes, it's important um, to go after the lowest hanging fruit and the small ones, but it's also critically important to play the long game. And so framing this advocacy work as small wins and long game is important. And things do take time. Like um it just look at the civil rights movement. It took years for that work to actually get signed into law. Um, it took years for the Affordable Care Act to get to the place where it was signed into law. And so policy is a short and long game strategy. Now, and not to get political too much here, but if you look at Project 2025, that is the result of years of work and advocacy. And we're seeing the impacts of the policies that are in Project 2025 as we speak. And so it's about how do you reframe the narrative and equip and, and empower people with the tools to connect with key people who are in power and or help to put people in places where they are more likely to support certain issues that can produce better health outcomes. In fact, and this gets to a question that kind of in terms of civic engagement, we know that there are direct connections between the levels of civic engagement, meaning voting up and down the ballot, and health outcomes. Like that has been proven. If um, if you vote, then you are more likely to get someone into office who shares some semblance of your values. But it comes down to the extent to which you are aware of what's happening, because I say this all the time, politics will impact you whether you want it to or not. And part of the reason why I wrote this book was to raise their awareness and also give people the practical tools of how do you schedule a meeting with a staffer. Um, how can I create a culture of talking about civic engagement and staying involved and building relationships so that when it's time to actually vote on a bill, you've done all that you can do to help to shape that person's perspective.
And from from a practical standpoint, just the and let's just take a basic example. How would a person know about their, and since we're talking about health, their policies around health? Because I mean, for the most part, we're going to hear sound bites from
Mm-hmm.
the politicians that we'll need to vote for, and from the local standpoint, let's just say our towns, because we won't know won't get any of that information.
Mm-hmm.
So what's one or two tips that an individual could do to know about, from a local standpoint, what they believe in?
So it is being willing to attend meetings and town halls and Zoom meetings that are hosted by the elected officials or those who are um, uh, who have credible information to share. Just like it starts with the conversation. It it starts with having these conversations. It starts with sharing out this type of content um, as a way to encourage people to get involved. This isn't a one-off thing. This is about playing a long game, and so if you attend the parent teacher conference, if you attend the local council meeting, it starts there, and um, of course there is always going to be voter apathy, um, but that does not absolve us from being able to get involved with the issues that impact us, and it starts with sharing information, credible information, being involved, staying engaged, building relationships, vetting social media content, and building from there, which is and so all of that is another reason why I'm having a book launch to discuss and to hold space for what's happening, to encourage others to share this information so that as we think about midterms next year and we think about 2028, hopefully there's been enough education around these unique issues to help to swing the pendulum back to the left. And I'm saying that because over the course of history we know that that the pendulum swings right and left. And so right now we are sitting in a right side, but we can expect the swing back left. And for those who lean left, now isn't the time to sit it out. Now is the time to actually lean in and to connect with your local elected officials, connect with your state lawmakers, connect with your members of Congress, so that when that policy window opens up, when there is an opening for policy change, you would have done the work to be able to stay involved, to get a new crop of people into office who share your values.
Great. So couple more things, Dr. Okey. This was very informative. Thank you for all of that. Before I get to my final question, where can people follow you or hear more about your upcoming book or any of your other works that are out there?
Yes, my website is enyastrategies.com. That's ENYIA strategies.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as my full name. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. And so, but yeah, you know, my book is is on my website. You can please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. If you want to book a consultation, if you want more information, um, my website has a lot of good information there that you can track and use.
Great, fantastic. So I know that we are always working hard um, as Black men, trying to provide for our families, or at least in the communities at large. And we don't always kind of focus on ourselves. So the question I always end with my guests usually is surprise. So my question is, how are you feeling personally as a Black man right now?
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. So I'm actually excited. You know, I'm excited about being able to pour my energy and passion into this second book. It's been very cathartic for me. I'm real big on self-care and soul care. So as I mentioned earlier, I see a Black man psychologist at least once a month. You know, I have other men's groups that I'm a part of. I'm real big into journaling, mindfulness, meditation, breath work, yoga, gym, traveling, reading, um, and you know, I'm real big into emotional intelligence, and so all of those things are what help to keep me grounded. There's a book that I'll mention called "Rest is Resistance," meaning that there is power in actually taking time to rest, because it's a journey, and you want to be able to pace yourself for the journey of advocacy. And so I, I've been very intentional about doing that. And you know, I say all the time that you can't pour from an empty cup, and I can't show up in the best way possible unless I take the time to pour into myself. And so that is, you know, one thing that I really want to leave with your audience, is to really pour into yourself, have a good community, and play the long game.
Great, great. Last thing, and I know that I only because you mentioned all that now, which is like, if we did all of that as men, I'm just saying, if we did all of that and we had a playbook for that, wouldn't our health issues kind of take care of itself? So we wouldn't necessarily need the policy changes. We wouldn't need the policy changes, because all of those things that you just mentioned are all things that we could do, right?
Yes, that's a great question. So for me, it is, again, it is both and. It's not either
Okay.
or. You know, we can do both.
Okay.
You know, so it's not, you know, you know, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. And I'm real
Okay.
big on ensuring that you're taking care of yourself to fight the battles at the decision making table. And so it takes both, and
Okay.
you being ready and preparing yourself to show up to advocate for needs in terms of policy.
I like that part. Now I like the both and, because normally we do either or.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
if we focus on, we're not necessarily gonna. It's like almost victim mentality that we want
Mm-hmm.
to feel. I mean, trying to change the policy is almost like, oh, we're a victim, and if we don't change them, then we'll always be in that same state. But if we focus on both, we can move forward. So I like that, both and. So Dr. Okey, I really appreciate you being on today. and really sharing your insights, especially for the health disparities and making the changes that we need to make.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to more conversations with you.
Okay, thank you. This is Keith Dent from the Black Men Speak podcast. I look forward to, now that September is here, bigger and better stories to help feature extraordinary Black men, ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. Thank you.